For more, Daniel Silke, independent political analyst, joins us from our Cape Town studio. Daniel, can you add your thoughts to the discussion, sir?
Well, I think this is a philosophical discussion for Americans. They're two political parties, and whilst many argue that there's not much difference between the two, I would argue that, broadly speaking, the Democrats are a little more socially aware, a little more prepared to take care of the population, and that's the message that's been presented, in a sense, in their campaign. And at the same time, the juxtaposition of the Republicans, the Romney philosophy really of you're on your own, guys, it's up to the individual to make or break their lives. And I think this is the choice for American voters in a time of great economic concern and distress. And it depends on which side of the philosophy you believe. Is it right for government to intervene, to regulate, perhaps to look after people when people do need looking after? Or in fact, does this hamper entrepreneurial spirit? Does it dampen growth? And is the go-it-alone approach, quite a hard-nosed approach, I suppose, from the Republican side, is that the better option? And I think that's the choice before American voters today.
Daniel Wayne here. Now, when you look at the challenges facing America, I mean, obviously, number one on the list is the financial situation and the economic situation. Do you think the two parties can work together in Congress to try and tackle this massive government spending deficit issue that is looming? I mean, there's never, ever been this bad. It's worse than what it was after the Second World War. And it's just climbing. I mean, in the last 4 years, there was more debt added onto the American debt than any other president combined. I mean, do you think that there will be some sort of realization that this is potentially a time bomb for them and that the two parties will work together to try and solve it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think what's quite remarkable there out of the campaign and out of, in particular, the presidential debates that perhaps all of us have watched over the last couple of weeks is that this doom and gloom prophecy of the fiscal cliff has barely been an issue in the debates. It's almost as though the two candidates are either too scared or just don't want to confront this issue when it comes to the major debates in front of millions of American voters. And we've had little clarity up until now on how the two candidates on either side of the political spectrum would view a potential meltdown and, in fact, the very fiscal cliff that you are referring to. So this is an unknown in terms of the campaign. No one has been prepared to make any promises. Romney, in fact, of the two, has perhaps gone back on his own particular record by saying, look, when I was governor, I went across the aisle, I reached compromises with the Democrats, and he's tried to sell a more unifying approach, in a sense, surprisingly for him, in fact, over the course of the last few weeks, which might find some favor with American voters as it happens. It might be the reason why Americans who perhaps fear the worst now need a president who can cross the political divide. I think as a cynic, in a sense, we can all be cynical about the US elections. I suspect that the one real result from this election, whatever the outcome, is that Americans are going to be more polarized than ever before. On the popular vote, it looks as though it may just be a percentage point or two that differentiates the two candidates in the end. It's already a polarized nation. And the depth and animosity of feeling that exists in America between supporters of the different political parties is such that it looks to me as though compromise over a fiscal cliff disaster would be extremely difficult. And this could really be a severe problem for the United States over the course of the next year or so.
I just wanted to ask, you know, you point out that there's philosophical difference between the two parties. How does a philosophical difference prevent or stop China from being the #1 economy in 2020, stop the United States from sliding in math, science, and technology, giving place to Europeans and Asians? What is the difference in that, you know, in the philosophical difference of these two gentlemen?
Well, I think China is on track to be the world's largest economy, and every projection continues to show that over the next 10, 15, 20 years or so, GDP output of China will certainly usurp that of the United States. It doesn't mean to say that the average Chinese will be richer than the average Chinese, which they certainly won't be, but the size of the economy, the power pendulum in the world is certainly shifting away from the dominance of the United States, and I think that is a given. I'm not quite sure whether either candidate in particular has a better answer to this. Both of the candidates themselves will express themselves in favor of innovation, in favor of high-tech industries, in favor of advancing education into the future, which will be a critical bulwark against the rise of other powers. Both of the candidates, of course, propound a free market economy by and large. Both of them call for entrepreneurship. There's no real difference in terms of that particular philosophy. The real test, I suppose, as to whether a further 4 years of a Democrat administration can really kickstart the issue of innovation in the United States, can perhaps return some of that lost investment that has gone to other parts of the world through globalization over the course of the last few years, can make the United States a really attractive destination again for foreign direct investment, possibly reverse, in a sense, aspects of globalization. Can Obama do that over the next 3 or 4 years? That's going to be the real test if the United States is to, in fact, put up some fight against those that threaten its global power.
Daniel, let's bring it all home. What impact is the outcome of this election going to have on us here in South Africa?
Well, I don't think too much, to be perfectly honest. I think we all felt 4 years ago when Obama was elected that someone with an African connection or a continental connection would put Africa on the front burner in the broad continental sense. And in fact, over the last 4 years, we've seen precious little from the United States in Africa. The US has been consumed with domestic issues, as I suspect it will be, especially in an era when it needs to recover from economic hardship. It's obsessed, of course, with the rise of China, as we've mentioned. And I don't think, unfortunately, that Africa is on the front burner. Only in the latter part of the Obama presidency did we see the arrival of Hillary Clinton on an economic junket here on the continent to try and restore some of the lost positioning that the United States has befallen the United States, largely, I might add, to the Chinese and to other very adept developing nation players on the continent. So for the moment, I think the United States will be all consumed with its domestic political concerns, with getting that economy running, with getting Americans back in the workplace, confronting a rising China. And very unfortunately, Africa essentially falls off the map for the Americans. But Africa's on the map, of course, for just about everybody else. And what America loses out on in Africa, I suspect many others will take advantage of.
Daniel, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Daniel Silke, independent political analyst. Now in local news, South Africa has changed the weightings